To our seventh committee vodcast. This is a series of conversations with Strata experts about how to build effective committees. The focus of our conversation will always be around the human factors rather than the legal requirements. Joining us today again are Nicholas Abbey with experience from a large multi-layered subdivision and Catherine Lisa with experience of multi-storey apartment living, with many projects and improvements with a particular passion for sustainability. Catherine is also the first lot owner to become a president of SCA WA. And welcome both of you again. So far, we have explored with Catherine and Nick why people volunteer to be on a committee, their experience of joining a committee, what are the most important steps for a committee to do from day one, and managing your manager. Out of that, we had 5 important steps. The first was building relationships with the manager and the committee. Second was creating a work plan for the year and an action list to be achieved. The third was creating handover for outgoing committee members and the incoming committee. The fourth, keeping communication open and transparent. And the fifth was about recruitment and induction pack for the committee, and one for the strata manager and one for the chair. These podcasts are all recorded and are available on the website to download and listen to. So again, welcome back, Catherine and Nick, and thank you for giving up your time again to share your experiences with us today. Today, I thought we would talk about community surveys and the how-to of community surveys. Community surveys form, an important part, or community engagement, not necessarily a survey, but community engagement informs an important tool for the committee so that it can be sure that it's working on and delivering the things that are important to our committees. Now, I know there's a bit of a background for this, Nick, and I know that from our previous conversations that you like to connect our community engagement with our strategic plans and our action lists, and I'll let you expand on that. And with Catherine, again, I know from that practical aspect of refurbishment and achieving some of the wonderful projects you've done, you have to have the community on board. And so you will also have something to share about just that community engagement. And the sort of things that we kind of want to touch on, which Nick no doubt will wrap up at the end and give us 5 top tips from our conversation today that we can all take away and use. So I'll pass to you, Nick, first to sort of give us that background about community engagement, and then from there we can each share a story around what we've tried and what worked and what didn't.
We are creatures of habit. I must have missed my true calling. I love surveys, so long as they're done simply and that they produce good outcomes, of course, for owners' corporations. Obviously, a survey may be of lot owners, but also, of course, in many OCs, tenants are part of that as well. It's not the only way, obviously, of obtaining information to inform an owner's corporation's work. Discussions of lot owners, including at an AGM or even a social event, can be just as useful, obviously. But larger numbers of people can have input, and there's a written record that can be a tremendous source of ideas and suggestions. And it can be as simple as an email sent to lot owners or using tools such as SurveyMonkey. In some owners' corporations, the use of a survey, it may be part of a shift for a committee, for some committees, from doing things for lot owners to perhaps more doing things with lot owners. And a survey, and I always emphasize this, it's a simple yet powerful tool to link all 3 corners of the owners' corporation triangle: lot owners, the manager, and the committee. So if you want me to, I can just perhaps expand on our own experience with developing a survey.
Sure.
Yep. Okay. And I should emphasize at the outset that it's a useful process that may have three parts. I'm focusing today on the survey, but of course, a committee may, after a community survey, do its own SWOT analysis to look at strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and challenges, which in turn may inform an action plan for the next 12 months, or, and a bit more grandiose, may inform a strategic plan if it doesn't actually have one already. The issues identified for a survey, now this is a key problem and challenge. It will be informed by the manager's work in the owner's corporation and by what lot owners had previously raised as issues in the interactions with the manager and committee members, including at annual general meetings. So there's often, there's a suite or a raft of issues that you need to sort of think about and see how they may coalesce in a practical way in a survey. They need not be issues as narrowly defined by an owner's corporation, pertaining to common property, etc. They may be far more community-centric, community issues. So in this particular owner's corporation, as a case study with 25 homes, the issues were the maintenance of common property, so footpaths, drains, nature scripts, etc. The appearance of lots, so the lots and landscaping and so on. Road safety and car parking, drainage and stormwater control, the local environment, safety and security, the governance and management of the owner's corporation, like how useful is information, residents, links with the committee, fees and so on. Noise often ends up being on a survey, whether it's barking dogs or cooling units, local council services and support, responsible pet ownership, neighbourly relations, and plans for future improvement. Now that's 12 set of issues. If they're done simply, the response rate, like in this particular, 25 lots, 16 or 17 lot owners got back, so that's a good response rate, obviously. Once again, it's best to include a broad range of issues. I find that's very empowering for lot owners. They're commenting on the things that matter. As to whether the owner's corporation and the committee and the manager can act on those or perhaps support those in some way is another matter altogether. And of course, in a survey, lot owners may be asked, for the issues you rated with high importance, are there any specific actions you would like to see? Are there further topics, issues of special interest, other suggestions, etc.? And importantly, lot owners and residents should have the option to contribute anonymously. Most don't, most are more than happy, but it's really important. Surveys are also an important way of identifying issues that sometimes lot owners and residents, like noise, for example, may find difficult to deal with directly on their own. And these issues can just, they gather momentum, they seem to be trivial, and over months and even years, you end up with a major problem and there's a grievance process and sometimes relationships that can never be repaired. So I always think of surveys as a way of identifying issues that may, may be able to nip them in the bud as well. Just some final comments. Look, obviously, there's a quantitative side to surveys, usually a 1 to 5 response scale, from low to high. We use language that is neutral and doesn't provoke bias. And we don't use words that may even contribute to conflict or non-neighbourly relations. And I have to say, perfect examples of that, wandering cats or cooling unit noise, you have to actually carefully word those so that you're not actually pointing the finger at anyone or implying criticism of any lot owner in that regard. It can only polarize a community. Final comment, besides being a basis for an action plan or a strategic plan, the community issues identified in a survey can serve to promote participation in an AGM. And that's why some owners corporations like to actually have an annual survey. Look, maybe every 2 years is sufficient, but you may actually focus on particular issues. It may not be the total set of 12 or whatever issues you want to focus on. Because an AGM benefits from the focused information and ideas already provided through a survey, bearing in mind too that some AGMs for lot owners can be perceived, rightly or wrongly, as to some extent perfunctory and bureaucratic box ticking and approval of preset motions, rather than a real forum for conversation and considering the issues that matter to lot owners and residents. So we always think of AGMs as being the business of the day and what has to be dealt with, and the preset motions, obviously, that's what has to be dealt with, of course. But at the same time, where an AGM becomes a forum for conversations about issues, hearing lot owners' suggestions, all of which are powerfully informed by a survey to begin with.
So interesting. That nicely segues into my story, because the survey that I was involved in, and this is the first real survey that I've done, so this is a raw experience, but it was about the AGM. And it's interesting that you say that, because COVID has pushed the industry to, first of all, an online format from which it most likely won't go back from. Like it's a significant change. The other thing that occurred, of course, too, was that, and is still changing, is that we now have online voting platforms. So in some ways, it just got worse, Nick, I hate to tell you, because you know, now you get to vote on an online platform and you don't have to say a thing. So it reinforces the fact that the AGM is a business meeting, and it isn't that sort of meant to be, if you like, or the focus of it to be around that community open forum and discussion, which is something internally we're discussing as well. Even with my committee that I'm going to talk about now with this survey, we're looking at sort of a hybrid solution as well that would maybe still have a face-to-face but still can be broadcast, or we look at using two platforms so that we can do this, like where Zoom does this really well, this idea of being able to have a conversation, people can put their hand up, you can moderate and regulate, but people would have a voice, as against a platform where they don't have a voice. They can hear and they can see, but they can't speak. They can use a chat box, you know. So anyway, it is a work in progress. But so because we were forced into this and moved to AGM, onlines, etc., the committee was very interested to see how people really felt about it. And another thing I'll note in this, it is well, it's not the first survey that was done, but it was the first survey that was done that we sought their opinion on, versus a very narrow, if you like, we're only dealing with these kind of issues. And so that is an important thing. And if I jump to the last one about what would we change for the next one, I think I would broaden it, as you say, so that we could gather other information at the same time. In other words, let them have a voice, which this one was quite narrow, but they still managed to, because they were allowed to give their opinions, we still got some wild opinions that had nothing to do with AGMs, of course. But so I just want to take you through from, as the manager, what I was doing after you as the committee came up with the questions, which was, you know, a brainstorming session, and they came up with a list of things that they would like to ask our owners. And then it was passed to me, you go and make a survey, right? Now, as I said off late, this was my first survey, so, you know, really green on this. And so the first thing I had to think about was, well, how do I go to market? Like, how do I go to that? I mean, you suggested doing an email. That probably was not, given it's a fairly large scheme on this case, that was perhaps not going to be the best way to go. But you'd have to have it on the list of, is it that? Is it a QR code and a smart form, and let them, you know, go into there and answer directly on that? The problem around that would be scale rating, for example. But if it was just all opinion, that was probably a good thing. They can text box it in. From my perspective, it goes to a spreadsheet. I can easily pull that out and perhaps do something with it at the other end, or use some kind of proprietary survey tool. SurveyMonkey, you mentioned, and SurveyMonkey was in fact what we used, because SurveyMonkey has two levels of engagement. One is a free bit for up to 10 questions, but you don't get the reporting mechanism, as in as a separate downloadable document. You can see it but not touch it. Or you pay $350 a year and you get access to the platform and you get a report. So we chose that second option. So we did SurveyMonkey and we paid to have it so we can get the full access to it. SurveyMonkey, it turns out. So then I was still okay. So I had the tool I was going to use, but I still had no idea how to write the questions. So I sort of spent some time on SurveyMonkey, probably about an hour, and they have lots of templates. I found out. So they have templates that like whizzes, that help you build your own survey. Complete with different sorts of rating scales. So after reading a few of those, I got the general idea of what I was trying to achieve. Some of the questions I could even pinch from some of their surveys, like as in they were better worded than, say, how the committee had framed something, especially if I was looking for a rating type answer. And I sort of thought about, if they were all opinion, how was I going to process all of the opinions? Okay, and this, as I said, was a large scheme. What if everybody responded? How was I simply going to process that? So I quickly worked out I didn't want many opinion questions. So I narrowed that down to just 2 opinions and 10 questions that were all scalable. The beauty of that was that SurveyMonkey condenses all of that statistical information on scaled stuff and gives you pretty graphs and, or does all the maths for you. So you've only got to, pull that out quite easily. But the opinion stuff is, yes, just text, long pages of that. I had 62 responses. So while that was pretty good to get 62 responses out of the total scheme of 754, which is what I was dreading if I got 754. But 62, let me tell you, was still a lot to go through and read every one of those opinions. So once I'd pulled it together and worked it out, I then emailed it out to everyone that we had on the database. Interestingly, we got responses from people who didn't come to the AGM at all. So that was really, really good. That we engaged. We had some engagement other than the people who come to the AGM. So perhaps a different cohort was reached in this way. Because the questions were so narrow, of course, they couldn't contribute in a way if we had asked them other opinions about something. And then SurveyMonkey, kept telling me how many have responded. They told me when it was finished. That was all automated. And as I said, they spit out this nice report. To make it easier for the committee, I then pulled apart that report and made a 1-pager so that at a glance they could see the 10 questions and all the statistical answers in a way that made it easy for them to digest, and then pulled apart the 2 opinion ones to group those into good and bad kind of comments, if you like, and that made it easier for them to review. On the reporting to members, we haven't quite got to that stage yet. We're just now, the committee hasn't had time to review it yet, but that's the next job. And we have a newsletter coming up. So I assume we will put the result in the newsletter. And I'd be interested, Nick, to know, is that how you did the reporting, and what was the time from when you finished the survey to the reporting, or whether it was just delivered at the AGM? But hold that answer for a second. The time overall for me from go to woe, I estimate, was about 3 hours. So learning how to do it, building the questions, getting them out, doing the email, processing the data, putting the data in a meaningful way for the committee to consider, and then writing the narrative for the newsletter. Say all up 3 hours. And, I wrote down from yours that what I would do to make it better next time is that I would suggest we had that catch-all one that said, what else would you like to see the committee or the owners corporation be working on, kind of thing. So yeah, I think ours was very narrow because we just identified that. But I think the overall, so the results, there's 2 results I'll share that were very interesting. So we asked, one question was about, as usual, attendance at AGMs is always disappointing given the scale of it, and we don't get, we don't even get 10% turn up, right? So, we get about 10%. That's like we get about 10% turn up. So we sort of, how can we improve that? So we asked them, would you like a reminder of the AGM? And we asked that, do you want it on the day? 12% said they'd like it on the day. 37% wanted it the day before. 35% wanted it a week before. And 17% we're right, we're organised, we don't need to be reminded, right? So I thought that was really interesting because they get no reminder at the moment. So although 17, so that, you know, the 17% almost equates to the people who turn up to the AGM. So we found out why. So I thought that was quite good. And the other one, we asked them a question about how would they like to attend, like online, face-to-face, or this a hybrid kind of idea. And possibly no surprises there, but 34% said online. 15% want face-to-face, so generally, you know, not face-to-face, but some kind of hybrid where there's more discussion, more open discussion, definitely was 51%. So sort of a change for how it's being delivered. They all liked the online voting, as in that made it so much better. It was more organised, like all the positive things about how the meeting ran all relate to that. But yeah, interesting. So they were my takeaways. Yeah, so Catherine, do you want to share your experience?
I have some more specific experience to share about if I was surveying. I learned early on, I tried to survey about, let's say, a paint colour change in our building. Let's say we want to repaint the building and we have a paint colour change. And I tried to survey. It was a dismal failure. I got maybe 10 responses because that kind of thing is not appropriate on a survey. They want to come and touch and feel and look and experience. So I learned early on trying to do surveys for that kind of thing didn't work, and you'd have to run information sessions, put paint colour samples on the wall and that kind of thing, right?
It's a visual thing, yeah.
It's a visual thing. So, but once you've done the information session and you've had the visual thing and they've had enough time to talk and consult, then you can do the survey. Then you can say, of the 3 choices we gave you, which one do you like? But you can't do it first. And in one building, we even went as far as we knew that the, let's say, the older cohort in the building wouldn't really even be that comfortable coming to a meeting and asking questions in front of other people about the colours. So we actually, we had a subcommittee and we went floor by floor, knocked on everyone's door and actually presented it to them. You know,
wow.
Everybody felt engaged and everybody felt like they had the opportunity to ask the questions they needed to ask. Now, I must say we did get told off by one owner when I knocked on the door. He said, "What are you knocking on the door for?" "Oh my God, the reason I live in an apartment is so nobody knocks on my door." So
really?
So I had and we had pre-warned everybody with a note under the door. But anyway, so so I had learned that that I also learned that getting people together and brainstorming doesn't also work in terms of colour schemes or in terms of cosmetic changes, because then you end up with 60 people in a room and you've got 60 opinions. You still need to have preset work up front done with some basis of decision making to inform the discussion. So that's another area where I wouldn't just say, "Oh, we want to repaint the building. What's your thoughts?" Because that's going to get 60 answers that are not going to help.
Yeah.
And the only other thing that I have to really talk about is from a very high level, industry high level, one of the things that I find fascinating is when anybody bothers to do a Net Promoter Score in a survey. So the Net Promoter Score is, in terms of owners corporations, is would you recommend your friends and family to live here? And it's a yes/no question.
Wow.
And if they say yes, it's good. If they say no, obviously it's bad. And you can actually rate that Net Promoter Score against a set standard. Everyone does it. Hospitals do it. Strata managers do it in some places, I know. And it would be a fascinating question to understand. So I just went through this recently. I'm trying to find an apartment for my mum. And somebody said to me, why don't you put your mum in your own building? And I'm like, well, I don't think I actually want my mum to live here. Right? You know, would you want your friends and family to live in this building? Would you recommend it? The fascinating one. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's on the top 5, Nick. So what does a net promoter score mean? Does it mean that you take statistically that information and then do something else with it, or what?
Yeah,
or it's just that type of question, you mean?
It's a survey industry standard where you can figure out how loyal your customers are, essentially. It was developed by clever marketers to figure out that, yeah. When we do very high-level surveys, most of the issues that come up are maintenance, security, wanting your neighbours to stop doing something that they're doing, and you want to do something that, you know, you can otherwise not do. So from a very high level, those are the kinds of things you're always going to get if you ask a general kind of question. But yeah, I think Net Promoter Score is something we could all take away.
Yeah, that's and interesting. Nick, Catherine just mentioned that security was one of the high things in her survey, and you mentioned, sorry,
always up there, always security.
Yeah. And Nick, you found the same, and yet we're talking apartments versus, you know, broadacre subdivision, and security is still that number one, or about the number one issue, but it's very high on the list. So that's
it. Also, look, it shows that many, like, you need a comprehensive survey because many of the issues are invisible. We were really surprised, even shocked, in one particular OC, that community safety was such a key issue being identified by residents. And then we actually followed up with some, discussions with various people who provided ideas and suggestions as to what was this all about and what could the Owners Corporation do or not do to assist, and what sort of community safety strategy may need to be developed. So, some issues are obvious and others are quite subtle and subterranean, and they may be just developing beneath the surface and we're not really aware of those. So, as a proactive tool, surveys are so powerful. Do you want me just to recap quickly?
Yes, thank you.
So look, obviously the frequency of surveys every 2 years or, once a year prior to an AGM, and we would report back through a letter to all lot owners as well as a report back at the AGM, and that would facilitate a conversation around those issues. Very useful, including tenants as well, obviously. The survey as a tool that unites, again, the manager, the committee and lot owners, and hearing the community voice, which sometimes can be neglected if a community has become a bit of a silo, and that's always a risk for any committee, obviously. Number two, best to have a broad range of issues and questions. It's holding up a mirror to your community, and it's allowing people to speak freely about the issues rather than being too narrowly focused on things that we may deem to be most important, whether it's a committee perspective or a manager's perspective. Number three, the power of being able to contribute anonymously, really important. It's a simple thing that can often be overlooked. In the main, I find that most lot owners are more than happy to be identified. Well, that is at least internally by the committee, in terms of their suggestions and analyses, but some may not want to, and that's their right. Number four, as we said, using language that is neutral and doesn't provoke bias. And certainly, look, I've seen some surveys which are absolute clangers in this regard, where you can actually tell that perhaps it's one group using a survey. Look, I'm not saying that's the intention, but that's always a risk, and you have to look at it very carefully so that it's actually performing our fiduciary duty, and we're there to support neighbourly relations, not fuel further conflicts if they exist. And then the final point being, of course, that a survey is a thing in its own right, especially if it's linked to the report back to lot owners and tenants, but also informing an AGM, and can be a great focus for an AGM to energise an AGM, the AGM belonging to lot owners, not seen as a bureaucratic imposition. I'm not suggesting AGMs are that, but that's always the risk, of course. But that a survey may also inform a SWOT analysis, looking at our strengths, our weaknesses, opportunities and challenges, and that just might be a half-hour conversation on a committee, or it might be a bit more formal than that. And then, of course, an action plan. Ultimately, a survey, does inform an action plan, and if an OC doesn't have a strategic plan, it informs a strategic plan, of course. So I'm keeping the flag unfurled for surveys. All power to communities and owners corporations that use surveys.
Yes, and we're going to add the Net Promoter Score question to it, because I think that is really Powerful.
brilliant idea. It's
Yeah.
something that's never occurred to me, and that would be such a powerful indicator and measure. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Especially.
I've made a note of that.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes, yes. And I like the anonymous thing too, Nick, because also, you know, I found sometimes people, also we have in some of my OCs, we've had suggestion boxes. And those anonymous notes that come in there are also another way of getting communication where it's too threatening otherwise, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that's really good. That's really good. Well, believe it or not, that's our time slot. We've had a great conversation today. I've certainly learnt a lot more and what to do on my next survey. And I'm excited. The good news of getting the annual subscription was that we intend to do, a couple of surveys before the subscription runs out. So that will be good. I'll take these tools that I've learned now as well and add the Net Promoter Score to it, to that next one for sure. So thank you again, Nick and Catherine, for giving up your time and sharing your wonderful experience with us. And we will be back again in a month to do the same thing. And we'll have a chat then about we're still exploring and using the tools of that sort of strategic planning. And of course, reading the IPCC report that's come down, and of course, that now greater push and our own government's wanting to get to net zero by 2050 and, our 50% emissions. Guess what we're talking about? Sustainability and strategic planning.
Excellent. Excellent.
And so that'll be one of the, and that's quite a big topic. So no doubt we'll spend a few conversations around that. So see you all next month.
Thank you.